You want to follow Rabbi Tovia Singer at his website to find his 2-volume book set, Let's Get Biblical Q&A. Get it with the CDs. The CDs are a nice little companion. Rabbi, the best way I can say the whole idea about the CDs with the books, I can simply say, yeah, they go together, but in a way they kind of don't. But realistically, it's kind of like watching a movie in just a regular movie or watching it in 3D. That's the difference between just having the books and just having the CDs. When you incorporate them two together, it literally is probably 5 to 10 times much better having all that information together. You can see it. I know you already know all about it. This next screen coming up will show you the brilliant index and the glossary that's included here. Large text, easy to find. We may even experiment with a few of these things today during the show to see how fast it takes me to get there on a topic or so. When we pull it up, I'll tell you what page it's on. The disputation, Paul Humber debate. I've got the fascinating facts about the Book of Chronicles, all this stuff at his website. You can find it either through him, through Amazon, or any other way that you could find him. You'll find his books and the CDs and the DVDs, etc. So lots of good, juicy stuff from his resource pack. So, okay, Rabbi, let's do this. We're going to go the very first question off the bat. And while you're folks, if you're calling and I'm not answering, it's because I haven't set it up. I haven't turned it on yet. Give me just a minute. We're going to go on this first question, and it's regarding Mark chapter 16, verse 17, which is really interesting. It says, and these signs will follow those that believe. They will cast out demons. They'll take up certain serpents. If they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. It says these things will follow. And we hear stories all the time, or not on the news. That's what's really weird about it. You only hear them. You only hear them through church stories, and they're not an all the time thing. And according to this, it says this is the sign that will follow for them that believe, implying that anybody who follows. So why is it that these signs are not actually following the believer? Let me put that up on the screen just for a moment. Okay, Mark 16, 17, and these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils, they shall speak with new tongues, they shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Okay, and verse 16, the precursor, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that does not believe, he shall be damned. Which is going to lead us to another verse later where it says the only unpardonable sin is actually cursing or blaspheming God. So is he double talking? So too much to cover. And I know there's a lot of questions. And if I'm not careful, we'll miss a lot of them because they're all on the same topic. So Rabbi, I'm going to turn this to you now.
Right. So this is a very interesting question. I've never been asked this question before. And I think the reason I've never been asked this question is because I don't, I've not personally encountered a Christian who would be willing, because the text says, this is the very end of Mark, says that those who are true believers, those who truly believe in Jesus, who truly follow him, that they will have many signs and miracles, including that they'll be able to take up poisonous snakes and it won't harm them. Drink any poison and it won't harm them. And no rational Christian, well, I wouldn't say no, there is actually a Christian sect called the Appalachians, that's the Appalachian snake handlers. They actually do that, and occasionally they lose a pastor in the process because he gets bitten by a snake. But the reason why, in defense, what a Christian would logically say, and this might surprise some people, is that Mark, those passages at the very end of the book of Mark is the first or the oldest of the surviving Gospels we have, is not original. It was added in much, much later. That means that all Christian scholars, unless they're in extremist groups like the Appalachian groups that do handle snakes, or I don't know, maybe at Moody Bible Institute. You'd have to be in a very extremist circles for someone to even defend that the end of Mark is authentic to the book of Mark. In reality, the book of Mark, I mean, it's the earliest manuscripts we have, and with Mark chapter 16, verse 8. From Mark chapter 16, verse 9 through 20 was added in later. That's very important.
Oh,
Right,
right.
exactly. That was added in later by Christian scribes who found it rather. The reason why they added in is very, very simple. There is no resurrection account at the end of the book of Mark. And the reason is the idea had not really developed very well yet. For example, the earlier account would be 1 Corinthians 15, and that would be Paul. We can't call it an account. Paul's, never met Jesus, but Paul is clearly conveying that the resurrected Jesus is different than the Jesus that that lived. It's a spiritual body. It's something very different. That was important. But in Mark, the last passage is really chapter 16, verse 8. And chapter 16, verse 8 ends how? It ends with the women, they see the man tells them, presumably we'll just assume that the man is an angel, okay? The man tells the women, Mary, Salome, and so on, that in fact Jesus is risen. And they were so afraid, they left and they said nothing to anyone. Now that is very, very different than Mark, Luke, and John, where they go back and say things to people. John is very strikingly different, because in John, Mary comes to the tomb and there's no one there. That's what's very striking about John. If you go to the book of John, chapter 20, we have the most embellished or the most improved gospel. There, I know that some folks may just sort of read the gospel and not notice this. In John chapter 20, Mary comes to the tomb, it's empty. She leaves the tomb and she goes back to the disciples. I mean, she never meets Jesus on the way, as we have in Matthew, grabs his cloak and worships him. We don't have that. We actually have her get to the disciples and say that someone stole the body, and I don't know, we don't know where it is. And then everyone makes a dash back. That scene is completely inconsistent with the Synoptic Gospels, because in that scene, Mary then meets Jesus after she's asked by the angels, "Why are you weeping?" Notice, look at John chapter 20, 1, 2, 3. I don't have it in front of me, but it's really simple. So what you have in John is Mary comes to the tomb, empty. There's no angels there at all, nothing. She's surprised. This is what we are told. She then goes back to the disciples and say, the only conclusion possible is they stole the body. Now, this can't work with Matthew's story, because Matthew has a device in his plot in place that Roman soldiers would have been there that would have prevented anyone from stealing the body. So you notice that John and Matthew are completely, they're not checking their account against it. They're completely different. Everyone misses this and thinks about I wouldn't say silly, but the very unimportant discrepancies, which are like how many women came to the tomb. Interesting, not really important. What is important is that in Mark's gospel, they come to the tomb. The man tells them that Jesus rose from the dead. They flee, saying nothing to anyone because they were afraid. That's where the book ends, and it stops there. Scribes later on found that ending to be very unsatisfying. And what did they do in turn? What they did is they added in those last 12 verses, which have a resurrection account, people encountering Jesus. So that would then, Mark would then would match Matthew, Mark, would match Matthew, Luke, and John to some degree, that there's accounts. Mark has no account, and it's understandable why. It's the earliest. So therefore, the Christianity had not developed into a full-blown physical resurrection of Jesus, where he is resurrected into a body, like Luke, where they encounter Jesus and Jesus eating fish, with John, doubting Thomas, touching the marks, the nail points in the book of John. Well, what is very critical is that so therefore the drinking poison, handling snakes, Christians would say to you that this is not authentic Mark, and therefore we would never do it. Okay. So, but Mark doesn't work with John at all, because in any way Mark and Matthew and Luke, in any way you have it, you have to ask yourself the following question: when Mary, not the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, when she for the first time is told or discovers that Jesus rose from the dead, where did she receive that? From whom did she receive that information? If you read the Synoptic Gospels, that means Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the answer is the angel or angels, meaning one or two. I don't want to get into that, but that's the first source, right? According to John, no, the two angels tell her nothing. It is the angels sitting one at the head and one at the feet, where the wrappings are in John. This is critical. Mary is weeping. The angels ask Mary, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Mary says they've taken away the Lord's body, and I don't know where they put it. So she has no idea, and she thinks he's the gardener. Now, if Mark, Matthew, Luke has any semblance to truth, John cannot be true. That's not possible, because Mary would not think that someone stole the body, because she already knew that he rose from the dead, because an angel or / angels have told her. So the addition, what is placed in the end of Mark, those last 12 passages are designed to comport with Luke and Matthew and Q, ML, but not John. But the drinking poison and handling snakes is a later addition, and there are some sects that do it, a few do.
Before we take this call, real quickly, you've got to tell us about Q real fast.
Q. So, so what we find is that virtually all of Mark, these numbers are not exact, but it's something close. Let's say there are 661 verses in the book of Mark, so like 606 of them are in Matthew. The copied word for word, same thing Luke. That means almost all of Mark is found in both Matthew and in Luke. Now, however, there are about 275 verses that are common to Matthew and Luke. Both Matthew and Luke have them almost word for word, but they are not found in Mark. So that means Matthew and Luke were copying from another source. One is Mark. Obviously they had the book of Mark in front of them. They didn't have your version of Mark. They had an early version of Mark without that ending. They can improve that. Now, so they have Mark in front of them, and now they have some other source. And that's what Q is. Stands for Quell, the German word for source, meaning that source never survives. It only survives through Matthew and Luke. That means if you take Matthew and Luke, whatever they have in common but is not found in Mark, that's Q. That's your Q source. So those roll together. So we actually, whoever wrote like Matthew is actually using there's a lot of sources going on. An M source means something that is completely unique to the book of Matthew and is not found in Q, it's not found in Mark. An example would be Herod killing all the babies in Bethlehem, or the zombie apocalypse in Matthew 27, dead people coming out of their graves. That's an M source. A Luke source means something completely L. That means it's L. That would be, for example, I mean, there are so many examples. The Annunciation, that's unique to Luke. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's unique to Luke. That's an L source. So it's not too difficult to assemble all that. So the end of Mark was put in later, and I say later, we're talking centuries later, so that it had an ending with a resurrection account. That stuff was put in as well. Many Christian Bibles, if you look at the annotation, it will tell you there that this was added later, and therefore one should not rely on it for any theology. I've heard Christians tell me, and I find this very strange, that if you wouldn't believe this, they've said to me that maybe like that last page fell off, like it was there, but it fell out of the book, like the last page of the books fell out. That, of course, is nonsensical, because actually the earliest texts were not codexes but scrolls. So the end of the book would be rolled on the inside of the scroll. That would be the last thing to fall out. If you lose something, you lose the first part of the first page of a scroll, not the last page of a scroll. So that doesn't work either. A scroll would point to that the last page would have been preserved, and the first page is the one that would have been lost. That means a scroll points us in the direction that the ending of Mark is in fact a fabrication. It's an interpolation. It's a forgery. It is not authentic. That means whoever wrote Mark, and incidentally, we don't know who wrote Mark. And if anyone tells you they know, they don't. They have no. Only a Roman Catholic could say they trust the patristics, and therefore they do that. But if you're a Protestant, on what basis did Mark write? We don't know who wrote it. We don't know where it was written.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארתו